Aloha, this is Rosa McAllister, and welcome back to On Being a Service Warrior, interviews with the firewalkers among us. Those who have had their struggles and yet have chosen to come out the other side into lives of service for others. Click subscribe and tap the notification bell to keep up with future episodes of this ongoing series. If this is your first time joining us, don't forget to catch up with other episodes in this series, as well as other offerings in Network's YouTube channel. Mahalo, thank you, and always remember you are the light. Be the light. Hi, everyone. This is Rosa McAllister from Networks for Training and Development, Incorporated, from the Philadelphia area, but I'm here coming live to you from Maui, Hawaii. I've always been attracted to maybe the grittier amongst us, the ones who clearly have seen much and lived much and maybe didn't take the easy path in life and have also walked through some fires, some real fires in life, and have also somehow come out the other side or are in part coming out the other side, choosing to be of service to others. This is a series of interviews with some amazing firewalkers, as I like to call us, that I've had the extraordinary honor to meet, to hear some of their journey, how it has sculpted who they are, what they do, and where this has taken them. We offer you these stories to uplift you, to bring hope to what may feel hopeless, to shine a light on your path so you too can find your other side, whatever that might look like. So today, I am very honored for our guest today. It's Chris Grosso. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Rosa. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for agreeing to. So at least by Chris's Facebook page, he's self-described as a part-time author and full-time medal. I love that, by the way. He's also known as the Indie Spiritualist. I'll say that again, the Indie Spiritualist. I love it. So I met you, Chris, just this past summer at the IONS conference in California. It was a really amazing gathering of scientists and wellness practitioners, metaphysicists, astrophysicists, Nobel Prize winners, medical professionals, artists, and lowly little folks like myself, and lots more, all exploring deeper connections and intersections of holistic practices, spirituality, and science. And among the speakers was you, Chris, a young, burly, tattooed, funny gem of sweetness who immediately climbed into my heart. And we later found out that we had a mutual friend and mentor in Baba Ram Dass.
Yes.
I read Chris's book. I checked him out online a bit further, and I've been a follower of yours on social media ever since. And as this On Being a Service Warrior series began evolving and not just percolating in my little head, but coming into reality, no surprise, you were on my very short list of inaugural people to ask to interview, if you might be so willing. And you were. And here you are, my first guest. So I am beyond thrilled. And with the utmost honor, please, everyone, welcome Chris Grosso.
Oh, thank you again, Rosa. What an honor. I kind of chuckled to myself while you were saying you're attracted to the grittier aspects, because obviously I think I would fall in that category, but it reminded me of a time maybe 4 or 5 years ago where I was living in Ottawa, Canada at that point. I live in Connecticut now in the U.S., but Krishna Das was doing a performance up there, and he's on the network that I'm on for my show, my podcast, and obviously close with Ram Dass. And he said, "Yeah, come by early, come check out sound check, and we'll hang out, and we'll backstage and just chat." And I was like, "Great!" And one of the things that struck out to me, aside from the fact that every other word almost out of his mouth was an F-bomb, which I was like, KD, what? He talked about Maharaji and I had asked him, and we were talking about it. He goes, and for your show, I'll curb the language, but he's like, Maharaj, he just seems to attract all the F-ups. And he didn't mean it in a negative way. It's
Right.
just, so that brought me right back there when you said that, because, something about Ram Dass's light and his own grittiness and raw vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it called to me immediately 20 something years ago. And I'm grateful for everything he has done in my life. And, he just obviously recently passed, which has been pretty tough for me. But at the same time, it's just
Mm-hmm.
another, as you would say, lesson. It's more grist for the mill of looking at attachment and things of that nature. So anyways, not to start the show off on this whatever note, but like we said, where it goes, and here we are.
That's where it is. That's wonderful. Yeah, Krishna Das I'm a big follower, a fan of his for many, many years as well. And both he and Ram Dass, I think what I love about them most is this grittier or this very real part, the F-bombs and the whatever else comes of it. And, I've known Ram Dass. I was a follower since 1973, 74 is when I first met him when I was in college. And he's always been a very big part of my life. And and those pieces of him that were just real, not superhuman, not super spiritualist, but the very real flaws and icky parts that still remained that he was honest about was just always incredible to me.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I would like to recommend. I think it's out now. I was fortunate they sent me an advance copy, but the most recent documentary, Becoming Nobody, I think it came out this week, and it's available for digital download and purchase. But I was on an NPR show about a week ago, give or take, with Sharon Salzberg and Mirabai Bush, and we were just kind of sharing it was a tribute show for Ram Dass, and hence they sent it to me early. But what a beautiful documentary. Fierce Grace was wonderful, and Going Home on Netflix is wonderful, but I really liked this one because it went even deeper into his own humanness and his I don't like the word failings, but maybe coming up short or whatever, insert whatever semantics. But he really got even more just open and raw about his own, what he still struggles with in life. And that I always appreciate that. And that's why I take that approach as well, because there's a lot of teachers out there who kind of pretend that they have it all figured out and have it all together. And no, they don't. And I say that from, being and speaking at conferences like IONS that you mentioned, and not that anyone there that I can recall was like that, but I've seen, one big time speakers on stage and then backstage, and it's two different things. And anyways, so I don't mean to badmouth anyone, but it just makes it more reason why I take the approach I do, which is I'm a very fallible human being and I have my flaws, and I'm very lucky to be alive. I don't take that for granted, and try to implement all of these things I've learned along the way on a daily basis, and with that serve others however I can. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Chris, in my introduction, I said a couple little words about you, but how would you describe yourself? Who are you?
So many different ways I can go with that. I mean, if we're going to talk on the absolute level, I am, period. We leave it there, just like Ramana Maharshi might say, or his teachers before him. But on the relative level of form, which we also are, and that's how we communicate and are having this conversation, I'm Chris. Like I kind of started saying, a beautiful mess, I think, is how I would describe it. A beautiful mess. Someone who constantly is learning and working on embracing those very imperfect parts of myself, and learning more and more about myself every week as I see a trauma-based therapist weekly still. It's very important to me to be taking care of myself, which I've learned the hard way sometimes from burnout with writing books and traveling and speaking. But if I don't have certain boundaries, which I still struggle with, then I am not, I'm more, I guess, open to self-destructive old patterns coming back into my life, which I have to be very careful about, because I am part of me. I don't identify as an addict or an alcoholic, though. I mean, I have that part of me, but I'm just as much someone who serves, and I'm a son, and I'm a fiance, and I'm a brother, and but I do live with those aspects, so I have to be very careful about that. So that's a whole lot of who am I? I don't know. I'm on a good day, I'm just someone who tries to show up and honestly help others in whatever way I can while taking care of myself at the same time. And as you could tell, probably I've got some congestion going on top of like a herniated disc and some other bulging discs at the moment. And so I've been dealing with that for about 6 months and had a broken toe that just healed. And but it's it's a one day at a time thing, just being gentle with myself and trying to be at peace in the moment and go from there.
Mm.
So I'm a big bowl of wrong is what I am. And right sometimes too.
And right. I love it. And maybe this is a little hard. Sometimes it's hard for us to do, but if I had, say, 3 people who are really close to you right behind you in the room, what would they be saying? Don't forget to say you're also this and you're also that. How would they answer the question? Who are you, Chris? Or if I were to ask them privately, who is Chris? What might they say?
See, I like that we're taking that approach, because I am the worst at taking compliments or giving myself that stuff, even though in the workshops I teach, like I'm trying to help people, and I do work on that. But I like that. It makes it easier for me. So I think the words that are coming to mind, I'm trying to like think of my fiance or my best friend or my parents or brother, like what would they be saying? Words like gentle, compassionate, giving, loving, big-hearted. I think those are kind of like the main. Yeah, it's always, and ever since I was like 8 or 9 years old, like I always knew that I wanted to be in a field of helping other people. Like even at that young of an age, I was very. I've always been an empath as far back as I can remember, and feeling others' feelings. And even though I grew up like this punk rock, skateboarding, outcast, so to speak, in a rural town in Connecticut, there was always another side of me that was always wanting to help other people and standing up for like, I had friends that were gay in high school, and this is the early 90s in a rural town. And, you know, they were afraid to come out of the closet because of the ramifications. Or I had, there weren't many African Americans where I grew up, but there were a few. And, I would get in fights standing up for them because homophobia, racism, sexism, all these things were very rampant. And I mean, we're seeing a resurgence of these things again. Not that they ever went away, but they were, I think, kind of under the rug a bit for a while. But yeah, so I know I'm straying from your question a bit, but that's I think it kind of all goes together because, like I said, as far back as I can remember in my whole life, no matter what, I've just wanted to help others. So I think those aforementioned words would sum it up.
Mm-hmm. It's just even the little that I know you, it sounds about right to me.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So you've already mentioned a lot about your life and where you've come from and all of that stuff. But I'm curious. Sometimes I love to hear people's stories. I love to hear people's pasts. I love to help people think back on their life to kind of think about who they are today. And a lot of times I ask people to think rather than go through the events, which we can all name the events, and usually what comes to mind are the tough ones. especially those of us who have lived with a lot of tough spots. And instead, what I like to do is think of life kind of as a meandering chart of life, kind of a visual of that. And sometimes I've literally done this with people where we've just taken blank paper, scroll paper, and done it like all the way around the room, and start with the day they were born. And at the end is today's date. And in between, we put ticks as much as, and we hop, skip, and jump all over the place as things are remembered about what life has been. But that still a lot of times focuses on the events or specific situations. And instead, what I like to look at are the chapters of our life.
Right.
So I'm curious for you, what maybe were the chapters in your life, as much as you want to share. And to anyone listening, part of what Chris and I have talked about already, and that I always say to people is, this is not therapy, this is not whatever. We're just as much as you wish to share. But what might your chapters, what might the titles be, or what might they be, and approximately from what age to what age, or however?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. And I mentioned earlier that I think I do a podcast, and I typically, unless it's a repeat guest, kind of start with that as well, because I'm just like you, so fascinated with people's stories, and very similar, like start wherever you would like. But, I'd love to hear a little bit, because there's so much to learn, I find, it's just the human condition is so interesting. And so to hear others' life experiences, but I don't know about chapter titles. That maybe I could send you some after the fact, but as far as like ages, absolutely. So I would say, there was birth to like 5 or 6 year old Chris, which was just, I was born in Maine, lived there for 2 years, and then moved to Milford, Connecticut, and pretty relatively normal. My parents had me at 21, so they were young. My dad grew up in foster care and didn't have a father of his own. So I know that he was kind of learning as he went along. And I was the first of 2 children they had. My brother's 2 years younger. But yeah, basically that was kind of like chapter 1. And I say around 5, 6, give or take, because I think chapter 2 started around that age where I was playing Little League for a very short time. I grew up playing soccer and hockey. Those were my favorite sports, but I tried Little League and skateboarding too, always. But I remember an incident when I was doing Little League. Our team jerseys came in, and for most of my life, even when I was a child, I'm big boned and I was a little chubby, and I put my jersey on and it was a size too small. And I remember the coach making a joke saying, looking good, Crisco, like the Crisco oil. And to this day, I don't know if there was, if it was meant maliciously or not. It's a very faded memory, but that was the first time I became self-aware in regards to like my physical form, because you're a kid, you don't care what you look like or being dirty or, whatever. But I remember like that was very hurtful to me, and I cried when I went home, and I've definitely had like body image issues ever since then. So I think that kind of started the second chapter, where that might be 6, like I said, 6, 7, 5, I don't know, somewhere around there, till maybe 12, 13. Let's see, I was still skateboarding, still playing soccer and hockey, moved up to East Haddam, Connecticut, where they didn't have hockey available. So it was just soccer. Was still skateboarding. Fell in love really with, I'd always loved music, but really fell in love with music once I moved up to East Haddam. It was during the time of the grunge explosion. So like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and all these wonderful bands. And then I met a friend, this was around 12 or 13, who introduced me to punk rock and hardcore music. And he was from a different school than me, a few years older. So he had his license, and I started going to shows with him. And at that point, that's kind of when a new chapter started, because I gave up playing soccer, still skateboarding, but now focusing on music and being in bands. And while my friends were going to like the high school dances, I was going to shows, even out of state, which was pretty cool because I was maybe 13, 14 around this age. And so for a youngster, like to be able to go and see these bands and have this experience was really exciting for me. But towards the end of, we would mark that like 12 or 13 till about 19, because that chapter, um, I was what was called straight edge for a good part of it, which was drug and alcohol free. Um, while a lot of my friends, even in school, I still had friends in my high school, but most of them were experimenting and using drugs. And that wasn't for me until I was about maybe 15 or 16. And I started experimenting and very quickly made my way through the stages from experimentation to regular use, abuse, and then full-blown addiction by the age 19, I would say, is when I crossed that line. I was in the abuse stage for probably 16 to 18. That was a strong abuse, but it was around 19 I started to recognize withdrawal symptoms if I wasn't drinking for a day or using something. And that started another chapter. And that's probably a longer chapter from 19 to like 31, 32, where so much of my life. So I went into my first program, my first detox and inpatient residential program at 24. So 19 to 24 was just this like downward spiral. I was working, playing in bands, touring, recording, what people might call a functioning alcoholic addict. But at 24 is when I hit that first program and went through that and actually took it very seriously and was sober for about 14 months. And then I had the opportunity to go to Rome. I had a friend who spent her summers there as a tour guide from Connecticut, and I ended up relapsing there. And that became a vicious cycle for me over the next, like I said, 10 or, maybe a few less years, but get clean. And I would have like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. But and during those times, that's where I began learning about like meditation and mantra and yoga and spirituality and really diving deep into that. But I wasn't doing a lot of the trauma-based work that I do today, which is where my real healing, or my deep healing, not real, my deepest healing started to shift. So yeah, after like my last program when I was, I don't know, early 30s, I'm 41 now. Um, that's kind of been the chapter where we're at now, which is I had gotten out of a program in New Jersey. I had to move back in with my parents, which was very humbling in my early 30s. I had lost my job. My car was repossessed. I missed my brother's wedding where I was supposed to be the best man during all of this. So I moved home. I had to file for unemployment. All of these things that I'd never had to do before. So I had nothing. I was living with my parents, and I was just like, wow, but I'm still alive for some reason. And so I just started while looking for a job, writing about my experience with no intention other than maybe somebody will read this and it will help them avoid some of the pitfalls that I've been through. And a New York Times bestseller ended up reading some of it, and we connected. And she's like, I would really like to introduce you to my literary agent. And I was floored because writing in general, let alone a book, like was not on my radar at all. I have never taken a writing class. I've never read a book on writing, with the exception of a few years ago, On Writing by Stephen King, which was a great book, but it was just as much like autobiographical as anything. I didn't finish my associate's degree. So it was, very weird that this came to me. And not only that, like, I know people that are wonderful writers and should have books published, and yet, I have 3 books now published, and I'm with Simon and Schuster, and it's like, how the hell does that happen? You know, um, but so that's kind of this chapter where, I signed up with this wonderful literary agent who's I've been with for all 3 of my books, and her and her husband have become like uh, definitely like family to me. I love and adore them, and um, uh, Yeah. So, and that's opened up the door to me speaking at like Ion's conference and Wanderlust and Yoga Journal conference. And I teach out at Alex Gray's Cosm facility often. And now I write for, I mean, I've written for all sorts of magazines, from Mantra to Origin, and now I'm writing for Revolver Magazine and Fangoria, which I love that I can do that. For those who don't know, Fangoria is like the premier horror magazine, and I've read that since I was a kid. But to be able to write for them, yet put this healing modality using the horror genre as the kind of the undertow, or not undertow, the thread is really cool to me. I was just speaking with Brad Warner, who's a New World Library author, for my podcast, and somewhat similar. Like he's a Zen teacher, but he's into punk rock and a little older than me, but we kind of have a very similar background. And he was saying his latest book is Letters to a Dead Friend, and it's about one of his childhood friends who passed away last year while he was on tour in Europe, giving lectures and teaching workshops. And part of it talks about how he never talked to his friend about meditation or Zen because he kind of felt like, he'd probably just write it off as woo woo, whatever. And we were saying how, yeah, we look at our books in bookstores next to, certain other books, and it's like nothing against those authors, but I know most of my friends wouldn't be in that section of the bookstore, if in a bookstore at all. And same with him. And it's like they need to come up with a new section. But so we have that same, uh, same approach where we're trying to reach just demographics of people that could use this help, or use this kind of work, the meditation, the mindfulness, all of these things that have been lifesavers for us. More so myself because he's never struggled with addiction, but um, otherwise might not, they hear the words and just there's a stigma around it and they kind of write it off and are skeptical, which I can't blame them. I was too, but yeah. So anyways, that's where today's chapter is. And I woke up and have an article I've been procrastinating on, but I'm giving myself a little breathing way because I've been at the doctor's all day and just dealing with this herniated disc and back stuff. But that's life. Whew, that's a whole
That's
bunch of chapters.
awesome. That was a lot of chapters. I can't wait to hear the titles of these chapters.
I
I
know.
love it. And that's, I mean, I know just a little bit. I've only known you for a little bit and only mostly from afar, but it's fascinating and wonderful. And yeah, yeah. And I'm wondering, so what are, like, I sometimes talk with people ask me, my life's very different in a lot of ways, but also lots of struggles. And my life's a little longer than yours, so I have a few more chapters.
Sure.
Hopefully yours are going to be way easier and all that other stuff. But I sometimes, people will ask me like, so how did you? Or so what are they? Or what would you suggest? And I, in some of the work that I do, I reference the three magic bullets. I was a major Superman fan. And he didn't have magic bullets, but he had superpowers, and he also had kryptonite.
Yes.
And I think many of us are far too aware of our kryptonite and maybe not as aware of our superpowers.
Yeah.
So what are some of the magic bullets or the superpowers or whatever you think that maybe you still lean on or maybe you're still trying to find?
Yeah, I love that question. The big one for me was, and I'm still working with all of these, self-love and self-worth. I know they're separate things, but I kind of put them together in the same category while I'm working with them because I grew up with a very low sense of self. I know part of it was that story I mentioned about the Little League coach, but um, yeah, I don't know. I just part of me has always struggled with not just my physical appearance, but my who I am, and feeling like a failure or feeling like a fraud, or just a lot of negative stuff. So for me, working with practices like loving kindness meditation has really been very helpful in shifting that. I'm far from perfect at loving myself, but I'm way better today than I was years ago, thanks to a practice like that, where in the beginning, when we start with ourselves doing the aspirations of the practice, I would very quickly go past myself and on to the next person. And now I can sit with it and really send myself the same aspirations that I'm sending other people in that practice. So that was a big one. And I think that also, segues into the, as I mentioned, trauma-based therapy that I am in today. And it's not that I had any major capital T traumas. I say capital T because when speaking with addiction expert Gabor Mate, he helped me recognize the difference between the capital T traumas, which are those very obvious events in our lives, like the death of a loved one, or a natural disaster, or a terrorist attack, or God forbid, something like a rape or molestation. Um, I didn't experience those, really any of them, until later on with like the death of loved ones as I got older. But what he also explained is the lowercase t traumas can be, and in many cases are, much more detrimental to our well being because they're not recognized or processed as anything major. And so they're kind of like a snowball where they build and build and keep growing and growing. And those are little things like just overhearing your parents arguing as a child. And I'm not talking about even physically, like hitting one another, just simply arguing can be traumatic for a child because these are the people you rely on to take care of you, and you're small, and the world is this big place that it can be amazing and full of wonders but also very scary. So when you hear something like that, that can be traumatic. Or not even if you're seriously bullied, but even if you have like one experience, that can be traumatic. All these things that we don't think, really affected us, they do. And that's what the practice of EMDR and ART, which are both trauma-based therapies, have really helped me begin to get in touch with and explore those areas of my unconscious that are still there, and begin to re-own and reintegrate them so that they're a part of me, and not just from 41-year-old Chris's state, but also my therapist has helped me to process them from that place, but also as like 8-year-old Chris or 12-year-old Chris. And that's something I hadn't done in therapy prior to that. I would always, rationalize and, oh, yeah, it sucked when it happened, but I get it, and yada yada. But my therapist now is like, that it's okay, yeah. But what about that other part? Because that's still very much in there. And they told me, and not in a mean way at all, but by not honoring that, you're invalidating that part of yourself still. And they're just crying out, to be heard and to be validated. And so that's been really huge for me, is allowing that other part of myself that is still very much there, to express itself. It's like Ken Wilber teaches a lot about transcend and include. So from atoms to molecules to cells to organisms, we transcend, but they still include. And as we individuals grow older, we transcend, but we're still including the parts of our past. So even though we're growing up and we're, our brain's evolving and we're learning and learning, those other parts of us are still there as well. And so that's been so huge for me, is working with those. And I can look back now and see that was what kept me going back to things like drugs or alcohol, when life got hard, because I still had this stuff in my unconscious that I hadn't worked with. And uh, my therapist also said, this is going to sound very counterintuitive, but those are actually a way of acting out of compassion for yourself. And they were saying, now I'm not saying go do that if something difficult comes up, but they said, that's deeply ingrained in your neural pathways. And that's what you knew to do in that moment, even though it was self-destructive. It worked in the past. It took the pressure away. It took the stress away. It took whatever pain away, even though, in the long term, it does way more damage than good. But, that was helpful in learning that as well. But knowing that, and now like working with the trauma based therapy and all the other practices and whatnot that I use, it's been very life-changing. So I think that was only 2, not 3, but those were a couple of really big ones for me. So
But I hear you. Absolutely. I think for many of us that going back in time and for many of us, we don't even want to go back in time. It's too painful. It's too hurt. But to do it in a way with compassion and to see that we probably didn't have other choices, or we didn't know we had other choices at the time, and to hold ourselves with compassion at those times, and to also face what we've needed to do, what we have done, and that maybe we don't need to do that anymore, that there are other choices that we have now. Absolutely.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings is the only way out is through, as uncomfortable as it is, unless, we, like I said, reown and reintegrate these things and walk through them, we're just suppressing, and they're there. And often that dictates the way we are in the world towards ourselves and others far more than, our neocortex or any rational thinking. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And whenever we have the courage or have the opportunity or the desire or whatever to finally go into it and go through it, that's the right time.
Yes.
For many of us, it takes a while to get there, or several entrees in and then backing out, and then entrees in and backing out.
Yeah.
And so and again, like we said from the start, for many of us, it's also, I've begun to realize at the wise age of almost 65 that I'm not sure that it's ever going to stop.
So first of all,
silly me.
I was going to say, I'm shocked you're 65. I wouldn't have believed that for a minute, but you.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
Yes. Not that age matters, but you have such a radiant glow. Wow. That's took me by surprise. But yeah, absolutely. It's an ever going process. I know that I will never be a fully healed human. Even people like Ramana Maharshi, who was enlightened. He died of cancer. He still has the human body. He was living in a mountain, so he didn't have, the hustle and bustle that we do, where we're still in the world and living. But, pain is pain. Like when Ram Dass just died, that was I had a lot of pain around that. And I saw people posting, celebrating that, he's moved on and with Maharaji. And I was grateful that was their experience, but mine was really just painful. And I know when my parents pass away, that's going to be painful. And that's just life, literally physically right now, dealing with the herniated discs, that's painful. And life will have, until the day I do cease, or, this physical body ceases, it's going to be filled with that stuff. And so that's why I love the series you're doing, is because it's so the choice is ours. It's always up to us. We can have this wonderful conversation, but for listeners, really it comes down to, so what are you going to do about it? And with whatever it is you're going through, because it's not until we actually take those action steps that real change begins. So.
Right. So I'm curious, 41-year-old Chris, what's 65-year-old Chris going to be? Who's that going to be? Or what's still on your list? And not to give us any spoiler alerts or anything like that, because I'm sure your brain has all kinds of interesting things you're concocting. But what else is on your to-do list, or the proverbial bucket list, or the I always wanted to be list, or what have you?
Yeah, I still don't know what I want to do with my life at 41. Not to sound corny, but I was talking to my friend recently who, my best friend, and he's gone through very similar to what I've gone through, as far as the whole addiction thing and near death, and literally being intubated because I couldn't breathe, just a terrible thing. So I say that just because every day I feel like I'm living on borrowed time, and not in a morbid way. I feel so grateful because, literally I have nearly died more times than I can remember, and I've lost countless friends to, whether it's suicide or overdoses, or a drug deal gone bad, or any just tragic circumstance that took their life before I was going to say it should have, though, that I kind of go back and forth on, nothing happens a moment before it's supposed to. But anyway, so if I'm still here at 65, which I hope to be, I hope my back is feeling better by then. That would be great. That's on my bucket list to get that all situated, because I haven't been able to run and work out in 6 months, which has been tough. But I don't know. I mean, right now I'm working on 2 new books, and like I said, I'm having a lot of fun writing for the magazines that I do, and um, it's been tough because with my back, my travel's been slightly restricted, and because I can only sit in certain positions for so long, and but I'm going to be seeing a couple of specialists. They're not looking to do surgery right away, which I'm happy about, but that is on the table. Um, but other than that, like I work every week. I go down to a youth residential program and work with teens, 13 to 18, and they're there for literally anything that falls under the mental health umbrella, from addiction to self-harm to suicidal ideations or attempts, and eating disorders and things of that nature. And I've been doing that for 5 years, and that's something I hope to never stop doing, even at 65. But I don't know. I think just continuing to keep myself open to the ways in which I can continue to serve others while healing. I mean, it'd be, I'm not all about, like, I'm not materialistic, but it'd be nice to be making a little more money than I do. I do live a relatively modest life minus my musical equipment, but other than that, my fiance and I we live in a nice area in Connecticut, but we rent an apartment, and it would be nice to own maybe a small home. And but that stuff also, like, I don't feel like this big calling to, like, go get a really nice car or get a big house. I feel like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And while I've never worked harder in my life doing what I do today, like, I don't get a day off. Whether it's just emails or catching up on admin stuff, I work like 70, 80, 90 hours a week usually. So it is kind of tough to find that balance of taking care of myself in there, which I do a pretty good job of, but I wouldn't trade it. It's tough financially because I don't have that steady 9 to 5 paycheck like a lot of people do. Yet on the other hand, I am doing my heart's work. And like I said, as far back as like 8-year-old Chris, I knew that this is something that I wanted to do. What I didn't know in what capacity. I just knew I wanted to help others, and I couldn't have asked for anything more than I've already received. And I've just been blessed with so many opportunities that I still can't wrap my head around. Whether it's writing 3 books majorly published or speaking at major conferences, like I just I give that up to really opening my heart and just saying, like, however I can serve, and and meaning that, like, it's not however I can serve as long as it's publishing books or speaking at big conferences. No, how can I serve? Like, what can I do? And in any capacity. So yeah, I think that's at 65. I hope to be blessed to still be doing what I do today.
I love it. I love it. And I love the mix of what you do that feeds your soul and is your therapy as well. I'm sure. And that's a major part of my life, is that, the stuff that brings me joy is also my therapy. And the stuff that's my therapy isn't always my joy, but...
So well said. Yes. No, you're right. That's like music for me. Like, it's so important. It's very cathartic and therapeutic. And but yeah, you're right. But I love the second half of that, because that's so true too. But if we really want to, like, do this healing thing, it's not meant to be easy. It's not easy, but it's worth it every step of the way. So
that's right. So I appreciate so much your time, and I'm wondering, going back maybe to the first question. So given all of this, so are there other words that you would add into so who are you? Who is Chris?
Chris is someone who definitely is determined. is disciplined in the regard of you have to be if you're doing this line of work where it's on you. Um, grateful for sure, absolutely grateful, and glad to still have a sense of childlike wonder at times. I'm looking around my apartment and I always laugh because it's when I get called a spiritual teacher a lot, and I don't consider myself that at all. I'm just an experience sharer, but I've got toys everywhere, and it's like so important to me to like have that connection with my youthful innocent, no, not innocent, but youthful kind of just awe and not be wonderment about the world. And yeah, I would think I would add some of those, and to me those are all positive qualities. Oh, I can't hear you.
There we go. I forgot I was muted. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
I took a screenshot of us.
Oh,
and
nice.
Then it's like, so anyway, but I love that. I love toys. I love to play. I love
yes.
the childhood wonder. And for those of us who maybe didn't have as much play as we could have, should have, would have, whatever, I think it's even more important. But play is important for all of us.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what age.
I couldn't agree
I can't wait to hear and to see what you're doing at 65, because I totally plan to still be around.
I love that.
Being in touch, staying in touch. But I want to thank you so much.
Oh, and seriously. I want to thank you. Oh, really, I love what you are doing. I think this is so wonderful that you're bringing this into the world. There can never be enough things like this and healing and conversations around this where we lay our heart's armor aside and really talk about really real, like what's going on and how can we start to move in a different direction, and hopefully whoever hears this, it was of benefit to them and of inspiration to maybe take that step in whatever direction they've been planning on or procrastinating, or keep going in that direction that they already are on. That's my intention. So I'm very grateful to you.
Oh, thanks. So mahalo, gracias, arigato, suksma, tak, kapkun ka, sign language, thank you so much for all that you're doing, all that you are, for being here with us and taking the time to share. I've learned a lot from you. I know that I'll continue to learn a lot from you, and look very seriously, anxiously to all that you have coming next. I wish you nothing but joy, although I know and it's not always just about the joy. But I hope that there's kernels of joy within everything that you do from now and moving forward.
And all right back to you as well, 100%.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
This series on being a service warrior is brought to you by Networks for Training and Development, Incorporated, via funding by the Philadelphia and Northumberland Counties Behavioral Health Intellectual Disability Services in Pennsylvania, and with the help of Joe Sterling of Joe Doggy Productions, Waikapu, Hawaii. Many thanks to all our guests and fellow firewalkers for sharing their wisdom, learnings, and joy with us.